Well, what's up, guys? This is Jay from COI. So, Super Tuesday was yesterday, and it was a shocker. Joe Biden did very, very well yesterday. Um, he seemed to really rejuvenate and bounce back from where he had been. Now, the one thing that I can say about his amazing win yesterday was the fact that it shows how strong the Democratic Party is. Now, rumor is that Barack Obama, after South Carolina came in on Saturday night, got a hold of Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, and not much after that, they dropped out. Buttigieg dropping out Sunday and Klobuchar dropping out Monday. At the same time, in almost a coordinated event, Biden called Elizabeth Warren and told her to stay engaged. Now, do I think Elizabeth Warren is going to do exactly what Biden says? I don't think so, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Regardless, what we saw yesterday was the Democratic Party at full force. And it was an impressive win. Joe Biden he won 10 out of the 14 states yesterday, including Maine, Massachusetts, which is incredibly impressive, Vermont, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Minnesota, probably thanks to Amy Klobuchar, Oklahoma, Texas by an inch, and it was a great haul for him, especially considering a week ago it didn't look like he had a breath of life. Now I'm going to go over the things that he has to worry about and the good things for Biden moving forward. Uh, so one thing that I kept seeing in the last 72 hours, let's say 72, um, Biden went from probably fourth place in a lot of people's rankings to first place. And good or bad, it had nothing to do with Biden. He did very little campaigning. He didn't do any debates or any town halls. It was everybody coalescing around him. Now, that's kind of problematic because that means the only thing that can hurt Biden moving forward is Biden. And that's an issue if you are the establishment or if you're a Biden supporter, because it's now a head to head race. And he's going to have to go into debates against Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders has taken a real sharp turn on being Mr. Nice Guy. You know, Joe is my friend. As of today, Sanders already has attack ads out on Biden. The last 72 hours, Joe Biden has, number one, called it Super Thursday on mistake. He mistakenly mixed up his wife and his sister, and he forgot the Declaration of Independence. Um, and in a very drastic manner, by the way. He said, for all men and women to be treated equally and something, you know the thing. Yeah. That's the guy who the establishment says is going to win. That's the one they won against Trump. His gaffes are a problem. And not just the racist ones that he has made in the past. No, I really think he has a mental issue. And it's not the PC way to say things. It's not the, the if you want to say social justice way to say things, but no, he's got an issue. One thing that the establishment has been covering up: Joe Biden has had two major strokes, and yeah, it was in the 80s, but they were serious strokes. And in December of 2019, Barack Obama's doctor reported that Joe Biden is not a healthy man and he is at risk for having another stroke. We don't know, by the way, if Biden has had other strokes between now and 2015, 2016. Um, Many point to the fact that Donald Trump probably had a cardiac situation that happened when he was in the White House, and we don't know because it was very hush hush and taken care of. My point is moving forward, the establishment has pushed everything they can onto Bernie Sanders, and they're still about neck and neck. So that's a problem, especially when their worst asset is the candidate they're running behind. Their biggest vulnerability is Joe Biden speaking, and he's going to have to do a lot of that. Ultimately, I would argue that the establishment picked the wrong candidate. They should have went with a Kamala Harris. They should have went with even a Pete Buttigieg. Biden was one of the worst to pick out of that group and to say that's going to be our guy. Now, on the plus side for Joe Biden, he has the establishment. He has the power, the coalescing super friends, so to speak. His buddies and his political friends could probably push him over the hump. And let's be honest, for the average voter, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, those are the things that they listen to. They don't listen to people like me or Secular Talk or Progressive Voice, none of them. They listen to what's said on mainstream media. And right now, the narrative is Joe is electable. He's the only guy that can beat Trump. He is if he's the anti-Trump candidate, and if we want to beat Trump, that's the way to go. And moving forward, I think that that's going to be a hard hill for Bernie Sanders to climb. So that kind of takes us into Bernie Sanders, who he won 4 out of 10. Now, the important thing with Sanders' victory is he did win Vermont, Utah, Colorado, and California. California was huge for him, and he won it quite mightily. He also didn't lose really bad, and that also saved him. In places like Texas, which was the second biggest delegate rich state, Bernie finished like 3% down, I believe. So at most, Biden is going to get 1 or 2 delegates. But still, Bernie should have done a lot better. He had a lot of issues going into Super Tuesday, and the narrative following Super Tuesday has been, well, Bernie should step out. We have the front runner now. It's time. Now that's the BS, but so let's go into Sanders and where he's got to really he's got some problems. And okay, the first one being, as we just said, the electability argument. Bernie is going to have to do a lot to get his name in the same conversation as electable. It's nothing that I think policy can prove. It's nothing that his supporters can say. The only thing that can be done is his supporters have to come out and vote. The young people need to actually vote. And I think he has to take on someone like an Elizabeth Warren as a VP. He needs somebody to center him a little bit. He is pretty far to the left, and politically, it looks like he couldn't beat Trump. Now, we all know that he has about the same probability as Biden has of beating Trump. Biden does have a little bit higher. There's no lie about that. Um, Again, that's before Biden opens his mouth. But the electability argument is going to be a hard one for Bernie to push. Now, I think he can still do it, and I think that there's still time for that, but it's going to be a rough one, considering the majority of the country, including Democrats, kind of see him as this far left progressive socialist. And in fact, they call him socialist all the time. It's time that Bernie has to take back that narrative and say, look, I'm not socialist. um, he's got to watch it with the revolution. Um, he's got to watch it with the movement speech. All of those words they're scary to the average person. The average person has enough going on. You know, they're looking at Bernie Sanders' campaign and they say, "That's great. You know, you do your revolution, but I got work tomorrow." And that's literally why Bernie is going to have a hard time moving forward. And then the other big thing that's going to be really hard for Bernie to regain his frontrunner status is the fact that he's going against the entire DNC. I mean, it's obvious that in the last 2 weeks there was nothing but pulling out all the stops to try to slow down Bernie Sanders' momentum. The DNC, the Democratic Party as a whole, were all coalescing to stop Bernie. There's a lot of articles written on it. There's pundits talking about it. Right now, they're denying that that happened, but they said it like just last week, just a couple days ago. We have proof that's what they were doing, and so Bernie is going to have a hard time climbing that hill. Now, here's why I think he can do it, and the pros going forward. Now, number one, Bernie Sanders actually did really well with white people. Believe it or not, he got about 30%. Which I know you're thinking, well, then Biden got more. Not that much more, to be honest. Younger African Americans, Bernie did well. Bernie also does extremely well with the Latinx community. Like, in some cases, up to like 75%. That is hard to argue with. Now, Bernie Sanders can also make this argument when dealing with the electability issue, which is going to be a hard thing for him to push. When he gets onto that debate stage next, and when he has that opportunity to speak to the American people, here's what he can say. And without a doubt, it's true. Democrats are always going to vote Democrat, but it's the independent and it's the right wing vote that is going to be what's needed to beat Donald Trump. Joe Biden cannot get those people. People who, I don't know, support things like the Joe Rogan show are not Democrats. They'll get behind Bernie. Most people right now are also incredibly worried and looking at numbers that have to do with healthcare. Why? Because we have a healthcare emergency going on right now. There's a little thing called the coronavirus that a lot of people are freaking out about, and not just because they might die, but because they might have to pay a giant bill to be tested, to be quarantined, to take 2 weeks off of work. These things are all on the top of the mind of every American right now. And Bernie Sanders can push forward the fact that if he is president, he will have a plan to handle that kind of thing. And if we have Biden, it's going to go back to the way it is right now. He's not going to fix anything in the healthcare situation. In fact, he could push on policy. Now, I think policy is incredibly important, but I don't know how important it is with the random person, the random voter. It saddens me that policy isn't that important, but to a lot of people, they just vote no on the orange man bad, and that's how they vote. It's dumb. It really is, unfortunately, but that's how a lot of people are going to be voting. Bernie can make it about policy, but he can't get stuck in the policy weeds too much. And he's got to come back out and give head nods to the things that the people love. The Trump's an asshole. Biden's not much better, and here's why. Biden's going to cut your Medicaid. You see, one thing that Biden really beats Sanders on is the elderly vote. And the elderly people love their Medicaid. They need their Medicaid. They need their Social Security. Joe Biden has voted multiple times to cut both of those. Bernie can take advantage of that. Bernie can also say, look, we got the Latino vote. We can move on now. And they know that moving up. Now, Michigan is going to be an interesting one coming up because Michigan hasn't forgiven Barack Obama yet, as they probably shouldn't. Um, and Bernie did really well in Michigan. Michigan's going to be a big state coming up, and Bernie could take full advantage of Michigan. Washington State, which is another one that will be in about 7 days. Bernie Sanders has a great shot at Washington. I mean, he does well. You can see on the maps the further west you go, the better Bernie does. There are places like Arizona he might struggle, but to be honest, Bernie Sanders has also been on record of saying he supports a form of border. Biden kind of just goes with what Obama did. Biden doesn't have much of a plan or policy. His whole thing is going to be attacking Trump. And that's all he's going to be doing because he can't really attack Bernie. He can try, but it's not going to really play out very well for him. And remember, one of the biggest kind of secret weapons that Bernie has is Biden speaking. Biden's going to have to do all of this off the top of his head. And it's going to be very difficult for him to do that. Now, there's a couple other things that happened. Mike Bloomberg dropped out. And a lot of people think that that's going to be a big boost for Biden. I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because it took Bloomberg $500 million to get the notoriety that he did and to get the support he did. But when that $500 million is gone, um, so is that notoriety and so is that Bloomberg support. Those voters, who knows which way they're going to go. I mean, they supported Bloomberg, so they're very fickle, very hard to read. Also, Elizabeth Warren, if Bernie does not get Warren for the VP, she could be a thing that hurts his campaign really bad. Because she's siphoning off enough that it kind of ruins his chances in certain areas. And not to mention, you have the establishment coalescing, and if you had Warren and Sanders, you'd say, okay, now the progressives are coalescing as well. So she's really splitting the vote for him in a lot of ways. And I don't really, let's say, up until Super Tuesday and through Super Tuesday, I didn't have a problem with her staying in. Now, I don't know why she's staying in. Elizabeth Warren has no political future now, as far as presidential, and that she's getting old anyway, but she has no chance. She's not going to be able to run in 2024. Like, if you can't win your home state, you're done. And you come in third in your home state, yeah, I would be surprised. I would be surprised of how much of a career she has after this. She really hurt herself. And then the other kind of the X factor here, and it happened in American Samoa, where Mike Bloomberg and Tulsi Gabbard were the only two that really placed well. Well, Tulsi Gabbard now has a delegate. Now, there's a debate coming up. The DNC, I believe, is going to change the rules before the debate to not let Tulsi on the debate stage. If they're smart, that's what they'll do. But if they somehow let Tulsi on that debate stage, she will annihilate Biden. If there's one thing that you can say about Tulsi Gabbard, she is a pit bull. And she very much supports Bernie Sanders, including writing an op-ed today about how talking about Russian collusion was part of the intel trying to collude with our elections, and namely pitting Americans against Sanders to think he's also a Russian asset. And her whole thing was that they need to stay out of our elections. But it was a very positive Bernie Sanders article. So if she gets that moment to shine, and she gets that moment to change the entire election, you know she's going to do that. You know she will. I don't know if she's going to be able to. But those are just a few things to watch out for. This is going to be really interesting. It's definitely down to a two-person race. And when you go side by side, you would say without a doubt, I think Bernie Sanders has the edge on Joe Biden. But then you start adding in all the shadowy figures behind Biden. Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Obama, the DNC, Beto O'Rourke. People like that are coalescing behind him. And when you're staring that down, it's going to be really rough. If you're a Biden supporter, you kind of maxed out your credit card right now, and you're just keeping your fingers crossed that everything keeps going. There's not going to be much more momentum going for Biden because this was the peak. He's riding it, and maybe the peak will last. We don't know. It's hard to say. Your biggest concern is Biden and what he might say and what he might do. Sometimes you swear he forgets that he's a politician standing on stage. You know, like when he told everybody not too long ago that he's running to be a senator, and if you don't like him, you can vote for the other Biden. I kid you not, that's exactly what he said. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, has got to get the elderly vote, and he has got to convince the younger people to come out and vote. This is a problem if you're a younger person. In some areas of the country on Super Tuesday, if you are under 29, you are outvoted 1 to 8. Now, look, I know that there's a lot of time that you need to be spending on, you know, your at work, your studies. There's a lot of things going on in your life, especially at that age. Some of us are starting families at that age. It's a really difficult time. But if you really want change and you want your 30s to be better than your 20s, you're going to have to get out and vote for Bernie Sanders if that's who you support. If not, then who cares? Just go back to whatever you're doing. Hell, I think the Final Fantasy VII remake is out, so you might check that out. My point is, both of these guys are going to have a hard time moving forward. And yeah, Biden has the lead right now, but it's fairly insignificant. This almost resets everything at zero. So if you're a Bernie supporter, keep your chin up. And now is the time to prove that your candidate deserves to be the president. If you're a Biden supporter, you have the entire Democratic Party at your back. You're looking pretty good. Just hope that Joe Biden doesn't forget which side he's on. That's going to be the biggest issue. Anyway, I'm really curious what all of you guys have to think, how Super Tuesday looked for you. What are your thoughts moving forward? Um, do you have any predictions about who's going to take what? Who are you going for? Is it Biden? Is it Bernie? Was your candidate like Elizabeth Warren or Bloomberg and you're just done with it now? I'm really curious to see what you think, how you see all this moving forward. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Have a great evening.